Alright guys, today it's story time. I want to tell you a really cool story, and that is how I got down to 8% body fat for the first time in my life. I don't know why I didn't tell you this story before, because it's a pretty cool and potentially insightful story, and unlike many other events in my life, this is actually very well documented with a lot of pictures and videos, which I'm all going to share in this video, so hopefully it will be insightful and full of some conclusions for many of you. So, where shall I begin? Let's just start by saying that when I started to attempt this precious goal of getting down to a really low level of body fat, by that time I had been pursuing the goal of getting down to six-pack level leanness for about 2 years, I would say. The first time I ever set my heart and mind on the goal of getting down to a six-pack level of leanness, it was the summer of 2013, and I had multiple attempts at getting down to a low body fat percentage, but I failed for a couple of reasons. The first reason was that I was really following not very effective dietary strategies. Probably I mentioned a couple of times before that the first couple of years of my fitness journey were spent following kind of low carb circles and low carb advice in general, which, as you know, I have nothing bad necessarily to say against low carb. I think it can be very effective for a lot of people. I've had some success with that a number of times in my life, but the way in which I was following these low carb diets was just really shooting myself in the foot. Basically, for a long time, what I was doing is keeping my carbs very low, but not low enough to be at a truly ketogenic state, and being at a very low carb intake, but not ketogenic intake yet, is just terrible for appetite management for a lot of people. So I was really following a high fat, moderate protein, low carb diet with a lot of added butters and oils, which are really not satiating, and it's just pretty terrible as a food source when you want to diet. So I was lacking the food volume and the satiating effect of the carbs to keep myself satisfied on a diet. But again, my carbs were just not low enough to be at an actual ketogenic state where you can also experience some nice appetite suppression. So really because of this, once the going got relatively hard on the diet and I got down to a reasonably lean physique, like 12 to 13% body fat in retrospect, which is lean but not crazy lean where you should be struggling with a ton of hunger, because of this poor diet setup, I just really couldn't sustain a calorie deficit any longer because I was just too hungry, basically. The other big problem was the advice I was following from a lot of these low-carb gurus, because I was starting to piece it together for myself by that point that calories really do matter, and no matter what kind of special protocol you're following and how you're manipulating blood sugar and insulin, you still need to sustain an energy deficit if you actually want to lose fat. Still, some of the messages from some of these gurus was tempting enough to jump ship once the going got hard, because they still said things like you can eat 400 calories over your maintenance and keep dropping fat if you're keeping your carbs low enough. So needless to say, that also didn't help. So really between the summer of 2013 and the summer of 2014, I've had many attempts at getting down to a low body fat percentage. I always failed, and at some point I sort of just gave up on this whole idea. So when I moved to New Zealand in the autumn of 2014 for an internship, I decided to put this whole getting six-pack lean goal to the back burner a little bit. And I became fairly flexible. I was eating out a fair bit. I was basically fueling my body for a long while. And I was kind of unintentionally bulking a little bit. And I was enjoying myself, and I didn't concern myself too much with getting six-pack lean. But then later, around Christmas time, which in New Zealand was summertime, so it was kind of handy, I started eating a little bit better. And by the time February or March rolled around, I hardened up a little bit. I dropped some fat, I was looking leaner and drier, and that obviously got me enthusiastic again, that maybe this time I could push to achieve a really nice low body fat percentage. So I cleaned up my diet a little bit again, and at some point around February or March, something happened which for a really long time I just didn't think was in the cards for me because I failed at it for so many times. I actually saw a really blurry, barely visible six-pack, or at least I saw some ab definition in the mirror when I was flexing as hard as possible and the lighting was really perfect. So that just made me crazy, and I was like, okay, I'm going to achieve this six-pack level leanness for the first time in my life. And I actually started following John Kiefer's Carb Night. You may know the name of John Kiefer. He is the father and creator of the carb backloading protocol. If you don't know who he is, don't look it up. You're not gonna miss out on anything. But basically, Carb Night was this protocol when you were eating really low carb, lower calorie, 6 days of the week. And on one day, you basically had a binge day. I mean, if he was sitting next to me now, probably he would punch me in the face and say that, no, it's a strategic carb refeed. No, guys, it's a fucking binge day. The way he is outlining it in his book and the way he was talking about it multiple times, you're basically going bonkers on cheesecake and ice cream and pizza. It's a binge day. So, shocker, that strategy really didn't get me anywhere. I was basically just yo-yoing at the same body composition throughout the week. I was dropping fat effectively for 6 days, and on that 7th day, I just binged myself right back up to where I began. So, I noticed pretty quickly that I had to find a different strategy. And at that point, for the first time in my life, I decided to reach out to a coach. I'm not gonna name who this coach was. Probably none of you would actually know who this coach is because he's not a mainstream figure. Sorry, I just laid back because it was a bit exhausting to sit up straight. So I reached out to this coach, told him what my goals were, which was to get six-pack level lean. And I filled out this application form. And there was this one field which was asking for my body fat percentage. And I filled in 13%, which seemed like a reasonable estimate because I was pretty lean, but not super lean. I saw some abs if I was flexing crazy hard, but it wasn't a shredded six-pack by any means. So it seemed like a reasonable estimate. What was interesting is that he got back to me and said, I think you're at 11% body fat maximum. You're leaner than you think, which was kind of a shocker to me. I mean, if I'm at 11% body fat and supposedly at 10% body fat, you're supposed to have this great six-pack, then how the hell is this possible? Now, this is an interesting point to pause on because now, with all the experience that I have, if I looked at a guy like I was at the time with the body composition I had at the time, I could see the writing on the wall right away. I could see that, okay, this is a lean, thin, not very muscular, athletic-ish looking guy. He's probably not going to look the way he wants to if he diets even more. I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious just by looking at a guy like this that, okay, this guy doesn't have a lot of muscle mass. He should just be focusing on building muscle. And really, when you're not genetically really blessed and you don't have a lot of muscle mass, you should focus on building muscle yesterday if you want to get anywhere. But at the time, I was new to this whole thing. I've never been lean before. So I had this romantic idea that, okay, if I just keep dieting, then all of a sudden I will go from this to this. I really thought that if I just diet even more and I uncover all the hidden muscle mass underneath the fat layers, then I will just turn into an aesthetic looking, buff, muscular, hard dude. So anyway, this guy heard me out and he put me on this carb cycling protocol where 4 days of the week on my rest days, I was eating very low carb, lower calorie. My calorie intake on those days was 2,400 calories. And on my training days, which at the time for me was 3 days a week, I was eating higher carb, a bit higher protein, lower fat. And my calorie intake on those days was 3,100 calories. He also recommended me to do 2 or 3 HIIT sessions per week, mainly because my training volume was fairly low, which was a big surprise for me because I was following people like Martin Berkhan. So I already kind of thought that my training volume was sort of pushing the upper boundaries here. But he said, dude, your training volume is pretty low, so feel free to add in some conditioning work. So I asked him, so that means I could add in another training session? He said, yeah, sure, add it in. So that was kind of an interesting wake-up call. So anyway, I went ahead with this carb cycling protocol. For the first 1 or 2 weeks, I noticed some new body composition PRs, if you will. I hit some new levels of leanness. I saw my abs more visibly, and I was really satisfied for the first couple of weeks. Then after the 3rd, 4th, 5th week, things started to slow down a lot, which of course in retrospect now I know is completely normal. I mean, when you're getting to this 11-10% body fat range as a guy, that's when fat loss is seemingly very, very slow because your body is pretty resistant to give up fat stores, especially from more stubborn areas like the abdominal region for men. So I was kind of getting a little bit frustrated. And after about the 6th week, I just decided that, you know what, this shit is not going anywhere. Of course, it was going somewhere, but probably my deficit was just very small at that point. I mean, 2,400 calories and 3,100 calories undulating throughout the week is not very low for a guy my size at the time, which was just around 80 kilos at the time. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to slash my calories. So that's what I did. So instead of the calorie target that was prescribed for me, I started eating 2,000 calories for 4 or 5 days a week, and then 2,500 for 1 or 2 days a week, which this is a very interesting point to pick up on, is that that's not a super low calorie intake for a guy my size at the time. I mean, there are bigger guys that are doing contest prep diets on 1,800 calories. But because my diet was set up so poorly with this high fat, moderate protein, low but not ketogenic level of carb intake, I was struggling with hunger like crazy. And don't get me wrong, the diet started working fast immediately. I started getting leaner, my abs were coming in more and more visibly, and I was approaching the 10-9% body fat range really, really quickly. But guys, the hunger that I was experiencing at the time, it was unfucking real. I mean, guys, honestly, I've done some crazy stuff since then. I mean, I've been doing crash diets here and there. I did some protein sparing, modified fasts. I lost 4 or 5% body fat in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks. The food focus, hunger, and lack of energy that I experienced at that time was unfucking paralleled by anything else I've done ever since then. I have specific memories from nights when I woke up and I was in zombie mode, mind you, at the time. So I was willing to push through any kind of shit that I had to push through. But I just woke up on a couple of nights and I just thought, if I don't eat now, there is just no chance in hell that I'm gonna fall back asleep. So I would wake up and eat some ham or something, and then I could somehow fall back asleep. I've had days when I literally had the feeling while I was walking home that, am I actually going to get home ever? Is this trip, this walk towards my house going to last forever? So my day-to-day existence just started to be accompanied with a level of hunger and just general lack of energy that was completely new to me. And ever since then, I've luckily never had to go through anything like that. Also, what was funny is that at that time, it was pretty cool that I managed to get a lot of my friends there into lifting, and we would go to the gym a lot with some friends together. And they kind of knew that I was pursuing the goal of getting six-pack lean. But when I started to get into this zombie, crazy, hungry mode, I honestly just felt like I just couldn't tell them what I was going through, because no sane person would just sit there and not say anything. And I just didn't want to expose myself of them telling me that, dude, you need to stop this, you need to eat more. This was also the first time where I was forced to learn how to manage social events and eating out with a fat loss diet. I mean, this was the most active my social life has ever been. I was living in this very much student city. It's a city called Dunedin in New Zealand. And I would be invited to potluck dinners, and I would make this really well put together dish with super low carb ingredients so that I could at least nibble on something while I'm there. So it was an interesting experience from that standpoint alone. So eventually it was clear that I was getting really close to my goal and I was pretty darn lean. And it was kind of weird that I still didn't look like I envisioned myself that I would look. I mean, I was lean, but I could see that basically I'm just a smaller version of myself before. I mean, I went from looking like this to this. And we also came to the end of my coaching period with this guy that I hired who was, I mean, it's questionable, I guess, how much he was still my coach, because I didn't really the diet protocol he prescribed for me, but at least I had this accountability person that I could reach out to and ask some questions from every once in a while. So as we got to the end of this coaching period, I shot over some pictures of myself that I shot in my bathroom and asked him that, well, first of all, what do you think is my body fat percentage? Do you think I'm at 8% body fat already? And then what would you say to this, which is pretty clear to see that I still don't have a great six-pack. I mean, what the hell? And so he got back to me and said, Abel, well done, great progress. You definitely achieved your goal to get down to 8% body fat. And as far as your abs, look, dude, some people are just not blessed with this great set of blocky abs. I have this problem too. He was a competitive bodybuilder. He said, when I'm standing on stage and I'm at 6% body fat, I still need to flex pretty hard to really have my abs shown nicely, because that's just how I'm put together, and that's how my body fat distribution is, and that's how my ab insertions and ab structure is. And you just gotta deal with the hand you've been dealt with. So that was kind of disheartening to hear. And so that was just a very anticlimactic moment to go through all that dieting hell and to end up looking not even close to what I wanted to look like. Now, life at the time happened to turn out in a way that I had the pleasure of experiencing some cathartic moments by my leanness, because I actually got really, really sick at that time. Shortly after I finished my cut and I started tapering my calories back up, I got some terrible flu and I was bedridden for a couple of days and I couldn't eat anything. I felt terrible. And as I was lying in bed, barely eating anything, and I dumped a lot of water, and obviously also my gut content got emptied out quite a bit. Once I was healthy enough to stand up and walk around the house a bit, I decided to shoot another selfie just to see how I looked like at the time. And I'm going to play this video footage for you because I made this video with my laptop. And this is a very, very cringeworthy, very embarrassing footage to look at, but it's actually the cathartic moment that I was hoping for from the beginning of my diet. Because in this moment, I kind of realized that, holy shit, I actually got ripped. So a couple of interesting things to point out about this footage. First of all, look at this guy when he's not flexing. I mean, basically, I don't even look like I lift. I just look like a skinny dude who is, I guess, fit. He must be a healthy guy, but definitely doesn't look like someone who is busting his ass in the gym and has been dieting hard for 8 to 12 weeks or whatever. But when I flex, now we are talking, right? Obviously, this is a curse that's kind of an unlucky hand that I've been dealt with, and this is something that is still with me today. I mean, when I don't flex and I just stand in front of the camera, I don't look particularly muscular. I need to flex in good lighting to actually look like a guy who is serious about weight training. This is true for many guys, but if you have a favorable body fat distribution or you have good muscle bellies, you can look more so like someone who lifts. But in this regard, I'm kind of just genetically screwed somewhat. But especially at this point, I mean, in this footage, I'm maybe 75 kilograms. And at this point, I've had just no chance of looking like someone who is serious about weight training without flexing at least. So all in all, it was still fairly anticlimactic to get to this point. Not just because I was going through some pretty shitty dieting periods for this 8 to 12 weeks, but really because getting to a really low body fat percentage was something that I was pursuing for years at this point. And I finally got there, and I've been just punched in the face by realizing that it really didn't deliver any kind of magical body composition change that I was hoping for. After this, I started bulking, and unfortunately, just 2 or 3 weeks into my bulk, I got injured, and that turned out to be the most serious injury to date because I messed up my shoulders. And if there are things that you really don't want to mess up, it's your spine and your shoulders. If you mess those up, they can get better really quickly, and you might not feel like anything happened after a couple of months. But in my case, it impacted my training for a really long time. But that's a whole other story. The only thing I want to show you from this bulking phase is that 1 or 2 weeks into this bulk, after I failed out a little bit, because I actually started eating a carb-based diet after this, I managed to shoot some pictures, which I honestly have no idea how I managed to look this good on these pictures. I mean, to this date, I've never managed to get a back double bicep pose that looked this good. I think a good chunk of this has to do with my good front delt development, which can show in back double bicep poses because I was overhead pressing a lot. But that's a whole other story. I'm going to touch on this in another video. So anyway, how is it like getting down to 8% body fat for the first time in my life? It was cool, I guess. But it was also kind of like, whatever. Life just kept going on as it did before. I guess for a few days I had this inner pride and this mighty feeling when I was walking down the street thinking, man, do these people know who is walking amongst them? I mean, I'm 8% body fat. When a shop assistant was rude to me in a store or something, I was like, dude, do you know who I am? I'm Abel with 8% body fat. What is your body fat? I mean, do you have your DEXA results? Do you want to show me? No? Okay, I thought so. Now get the hell out of here. But of course, soon enough, I realized, which I just couldn't know beforehand, that really nobody cares. My life is not going to change after this drastically. There are much more challenging and quite frankly, much more important goals to pursue in life than getting down to 8% body fat. I guess at that point, I just needed to actually face this reality. Despite all of these things though, I wouldn't change the experience. You know, looking back, of course, it was pretty obvious that, dude, you're a skinny guy, you don't have a lot of muscle mass, you barely look like you train. By dieting even more and getting even skinnier, it's not going to all of a sudden turn you into a big, buff, jacked dude. But I can't blame myself too much because again, this goal was just so important for me for so long that it was like an itch that you need to scratch, and it's just in the back of your mind kind of keeping you up at night, not literally, but it's kind of bugging you and you just can't relax fully until you finally achieve this goal. I guess it was also beneficial from the standpoint that it de-glorified leanness in my mind early on, and I didn't have this all-consuming obsession with getting super lean and shredded, which I see a lot of guys having around me who are lean, they look good, they look better than 99% of people around them, but they still just can't relax until they get down to 7% body fat or whatever, which really at the end of the day is not going to make you all that happy. And most people are finding themselves in this kind of anticlimactic state of mind when they actually achieve this goal. Now, this is not to say that I was not obsessing over staying lean and getting lean later on, but at least I learned that getting down to as lean as 8% body fat is just really needless for most people, unless they have some really good reasons to do so, like a photo shoot or something. So this is the story of how I got down to 8% body fat for the first time in my life. I may do it at another time, sometime in the near future, probably not in the near future, but I'm curious how I would look like at that level of leanness now that I have a lot more muscle mass and more training experience, and also how it would feel like getting down there and with a smarter dietary approach, not some crazy stuff that I was doing at the time. Probably it would be filled with much less struggle and just lethargy and just lack of will to live at certain times. So I hope this story was insightful for some of you. Let me know if you have any questions about what I did. Any questions that you have, I can answer basically anything over this point because I have way more data stored in my laptop than I would want to. So I hope this was interesting and helpful in some ways to you guys. Drop a like if you liked it or a dislike if you disliked it. Troll me, I'll troll you back. Let me know what you think. Subscribe for more content like this. And with that, see you next time. I don't know why I did that. Sorry. Bye.